Nice tie.
Corey, do you want to start? Sure. Turn it on.
Thanks, Dave. No? I have a lot of my voice name, actually. I've heard you defend a version of like egalitarianism, which wants to distinguish itself from social interactionism, right? And I guess I would like to raise a criticism by way of a recent blurb I heard on NPR by a congressional delegate from the Tea Party who said, you know, we have had a national conversation in this country about the morality of taking resources from people who have money. The morality of the government taking money from resources from people who have it and giving it to people who don't, right? And on the face of it, that almost sounds like a version of justice, right, or a version of morality that's also anti-social interactions. The idea that we're sort of islands unto ourselves, and what we get through our own activities is ours, right, to decide autonomously what to do with, right? And government coercion of taking resources from some people who have more to give to people who have less is unjustified. I guess my objection with the particular version of like egalitarian you want to defend is, I mean, doesn't in a sense the idea that the imperatives of justice or sort of moral requirements that fall on us to help others who are in need, when it's contrasted with the social interactionist model, sort of give up the ghost of what I think is one of the fundamental issues of justice, which is, you know, why do we accept a social system in which some people have significantly less and some people have more? I mean, so another way of getting at this is, it seems to me that your luck egalitarianism is especially sensitive to the issues of distribution that arise out of a system of production that is in itself inherently unjust. But your theory of justice doesn't have the kind of, because it eschews the social interactionist model, doesn't have the kind of leverage to criticize, right, the system of production that's unjust, that yields outcomes in which we have people who have a lot more and people who have a lot less. So, I mean, you know, it's sort of a classical ideology critique or Marxist critique of liberal political philosophy that, you know, the distribution of, it's the question, well, where do resources come from? Well, they come from social relations of dependence, right? So by getting rid of social relations of dependence in your particular picture of justice, I mean, aren't you really sort of giving up one of the fundamental issues of justice in the history of political philosophy, which is, you know, the justice of production or the justice of where resources come from? And that's located directly within, right, the social relations of dependence that your particular view eschews. So, I mean, one criticism or objection here is, aren't you sort of excluding considerations, fundamental considerations about justice in your particular picture by sort of conceding that, yeah, we've got capitalism, we've got the market, it generates unjust outcomes insofar as we have people who have less and people who have more, and now we just want to deal with that, right, rather than these more fundamental issues concerning production and how resources and the differential of resources arrive at.
There's several points there. I'm not sure I'm going to be responsive to everything you say. But one thing, one quick thing. I mean, so you might say, I'm saying distributive justice, that's the whole banana, that's the whole enchilada. And there's an old tradition of criticism that says, this focus on distribution is just the wrong moral, you're getting your priorities wrong. That's said against these views today. It was said by Marx a long time ago. We shouldn't be focusing on distribution. But of course, the bite of that criticism depends on, you know, your view of what is the stuff that's being distributed, right? If it was marbles, I think the criticism, you know, justice is the fair distribution of marbles, then I think that would be an extremely powerful criticism. But if what we think the distribuendum here is good lives for people, I don't think the criticism sticks. Or at least I'm happy. I mean, if you know, the system is set up, and it provides good lives for people fairly distributed, and you say, you know, I haven't told you anything about the production system yet. It could be A or it could be B. You know, who cares? If you have that much information, that's all you need to know. So that would be one response. A second response, backing up, is that you're raising sort of left-wing and right-wing questions. And luck egalitarianism, for that matter, Lockean libertarianism, will divide into left-wing and right-wing versions. depending on, as we bring in more facts, right? So there'll be further argument there. So I think at this level of abstraction today, I don't think I've said much that should, move somebody who's either, of left-wing persuasion or right-wing persuasion. I mean, to shift. That argument will take place at a lower level of abstraction. I don't mean to say that it's not an important argument. I just mean I haven't engaged that argument today. The third thing I want to say is about property, the stuff about the Tea Party, and I wasn't quite sure I got it. But let me take Locke egalitarianism and Lockean libertarianism, Lockean views on natural rights together, right? A view of justice can be, since they're both asocial, a view of justice can be asocial. What we fundamentally owe each other doesn't depend on what kinds of cooperation we're engaging in. It's the other way around. These principles determine what kind of cooperation is okay. But they're asocial. But that doesn't. But of course, then we need to store. Asocial doesn't mean that whatever property people can grab or is okay. In this asocial setting, there'll be norms of property and norms of ownership and norms of what's legitimately mine and thine. That will fall out of these views, either the Locke egalitarian or the Lockean, and that story has to be told. By the way, I'll just stop there.
Jerry, if you were standing there.
Nice tie.
Okay, so Dick, I have two sources of skepticism that I think are fundamental to your idea of Locke egalitarianism. First, let's take equality of well-being or equality of welfare. You've indicated you want to defend an objectivist account that is independent of people's preferences, their desires, their values. And you've indicated, I think plausibly, that we can make a list of things that are valuable in themselves or good, and that really shouldn't be much of a problem, and on that basis we can get a kind of objective characterization of well-being. So the problem is this. Conflicts occur even within the lives of people, or determining the well-being of people, because these goods come into conflict. You have to make trade-offs. It's a question of how you balance in a notion of well-being, achievement versus friendship, versus pleasure, versus any number of things. And I'm very skeptical that you will be able to create an ordering of your list without talking about what people actually value and choose, because given what Rawls called the fact of reasonable pluralism, even if we could get an agreed on list, reasonable people will disagree as to what to sacrifice for what, or how much of one of these goods is worth giving up for another. And I have no idea how you could ever get such a list with the trade-offs without bringing in what you're calling subjective issues concerning what actually matters to people.
Can you keep the floor and let me answer the first, then we'll go to the second? Or do you want to answer both?
I'll do the second. It's going to be really
Okay.
quick.
Okay.
And then, it'll leave room. We have another.
Okay.
Eric wants to ask a question. The second skepticism is about the notion of luck. And the problem is when you try to apply this to determining what's actually just and unjust, welfare, payments, or Medicare, whatever the hell it is, the problem is determining what falls under the concept of luck and what falls under the concept of desert. People have argued that some people are unlucky in the genetic lottery. They're unlucky in the families they're brought up in. They're unlucky in the environment they're brought up in. And all of these affect temperament, all of which affect will and effort. So on that kind of a view, everything is luck. You owe us a distinction concerning how you determine theoretically what counts as a result of luck and what counts as a result of whatever isn't luck, deservingness or effort or will. And without drawing that distinction very clearly, you have a theory of luck egalitarianism that will not be applied in a way that will generate agreement and consensus on justice. So those are my two sources of skepticism about the view you've outlined.
Yeah, thanks. So on the first question, on people, there's conflict, there's disagreement about goods. I mean, how we get an ordering? I mean, first of all, there's just as much commensurability as there is. It's perfectly open within the view to say the life of I could choose the life of a farmer in Iowa, or the life of a rancher in Montana, or the life of a banker in New York City. And when we describe the entire life, and it's in complete detail, ideally, and this list of satisfactions that each, it may be that it's indeterminate. It's neither, that there can be choices where it's neither, one is neither better than the other, nor worse, nor exactly as good, right? There can be a mushy gray area. That's possible. There's as much commensurability as there is, right? I don't see if that's any, I don't see if that's any embarrassment to the view. How we discover this, I think, is we need to engage in reflective equilibrium efforts. We need to look at a lot of examples and look at trade-offs. I think the trade-offs we're inclined to make now, any of us, are inconsistent if we brought them to the surface. Or it may be that if you show me an example and I say, I go for A, not B, but then if you vary the example along a lot of dimensions, I'll realize that what was really driving my intuition was that in the one version of the story, A had a black skin color or something, and that was what was driving. And then once that's brought to consciousness, then that doesn't matter so much, right? So the idea would be we use reflective equilibrium measures to get as much trade-off as we can. Does this depend? Subjective ratings that may differ between people. The intuition is, just from one's own life in the first person. When I'm thinking about what I should choose or what I should do or what sort of career I should go into or what, whom should I marry, whom should I date? I want my desires to track what's really good. And once we've lived for a while, we realize that our desires, I organize my life around desires that in retrospect just weren't headed at anything sensible. So if you have that from the first person standpoint, you might not, but if you've got that from the first person standpoint, then the sense that it's really one's subjective preferences or one's subjective preferences cleaned up that determine the basis for social policy or the right and the good. I find that foreign to my own experience. I just don't cotton to that. But that's a big question. We're not going to settle that here. And I haven't said anything I haven't said anything. That's a part of the story that would have to be worked out in detail to be convincing. And I haven't even said anything about that here. The second thing. What was the second thing? Luck. Luck. Well, look. On one level, I could say that's not my department. The theorist of justice here can just borrow from the theorist of responsibility, or from what John Fisher and Al Meal and Dan Elkin and these people tell us, right? My own instincts are both sort of libertarian and hard determinist, mostly hard determinist on the free will issue. But that could be wrong. Maybe there's some soft determinism of the future that makes room for responsibility in a world where actions are caused. Maybe that's I'm open on that, but I don't see that it's my responsibility to settle that. If there if again, to repeat, if hard determinism is true, then the deservingness portion of the doctrine doesn't everybody gets the same score, so it drops out. So I don't see that I'm committed on that question. But just to illustrate, but there are problems here. Just to illustrate a problem. There's a problem with the thing I tossed out. When I think about deservingness, I think it has to do with conscientious effort. Orienting the will towards the right and the good. Well, one thing you might say is, as you say, look, people vary in background features that affect their ability to do that, right? So we need, so to speak, a raw deservingness score and an adjusted score that takes account of, these background factors. A second thing is that, if conscientiousness, giving it a good try, that depends. Suppose it's World War II and I'm in the resistance, and if I'm captured by the Germans, and it would be morally very important if I could hold out for 8 hours under torture. Then some real significant good would be achieved. I could save some of my comrades. But I can't hold out for more than an hour, and I know it. Right? So there's no possibility that I can achieve anything good by holding out. So when the Nazi shows me the instruments of torture, I mean, why should I get credit for conscientiously holding out for an hour, even though that will do no good, right? So